We'll move on to meeting number 3, which is the Urbana City Council meeting for Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Hersey.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts. Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. We have approval of minutes of the previous meeting. We have 4 meetings, January 7th, which was a public hearing, the January 7th joint meeting with the township, and the January 14th special meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved. I'll second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Dean. Any corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay. Under public input, we'll be presenting the financial forecast for fiscal year 2020 through 2024. And give us 1 minute to put on a different hat. Oh, I think I got your chair.
Did I switch?
No. It's adjustable.
So I guess it's been a whole year, and here we are once more. So I'll give you a little quick background before we dive into it. The financial forecast is really the first step in our annual budget process. So this sort of sets the tone for the process that we're about to begin. It focuses on the general operating fund, and the general fund pays for most basic city services, so virtually all police and fire services and most public works services, as well as some others. And the purpose of this discussion tonight is really to evaluate the city's financial condition, and then we use that to make high-level decisions about how we're going to go through the budget process. Are we going to be adding new things? Are we going to be cutting back, and so on? So I'm going to turn it over to the mayor here.
For the viewing audience, this is Elizabeth Hannon, Finance Director, and with me also is Carol Mitten, City Administrator, so we'll each be taking a part of this presentation. Where's the forward? Okay. Okay. I'm going to start off by giving just a little bit retrospective of where we started. This is the third budget that I've been involved with, and I wanted to bring us up to date as far as where we started in terms of some major milestones and the actions taken, and where we're going from there. So we started, what looming over everything is the structural budget deficit and the need to systematically and intentionally address that. We're looking at about a $2 million correction over 3 years. We've taken some steps already to address that. The council has agreed to a council policy of keeping our recurring spending 98.5% of recurring revenue, which means we'll be spending, if all works well, slightly less than what we're taking in, and over time that will help us correct the deficit. It also gives us a little flexibility in case we have unanticipated expenses. We had about a $500,000 net budget reductions for this current fiscal year. We're looking at about the same for the next fiscal year. We began several years, a couple of years ago, with underfunded police and fire pensions. A decision had been made in previous years to reduce the amount of funding from what was recommended by actuaries to the minimum required by state law. This resulted in the fact that we began to fall behind. So we have a policy of aiming for 100% funding in 20 years, and we've begun down that road. We were also maintaining inadequate city reserves. We now are aiming with a goal to maintain the minimum which is our financial policy in place, maintain a minimum of 15% of our operating budget as city reserves. This is about the lowest we really should, and many cities our size are maintaining higher reserves. And and particularly in this time of uncertainty at the state level and the federal level. Our Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund, or the VERF, is underfunded by about $2.7 million when you look out into the future. We're going to be financing some purchases, so we aren't requiring a cash payment up front, and that is going to help us get back on track with the VERF. We had also taken out 2 loans in previous years to pay the MetCAD fee. Those were being repaid over a 5-year payment period, and we'll have repaid the second loan in full at the end of this coming fiscal year, so we'll be all paid off. So while those loans allowed us to make some short-term adjustments in the budget, it took 5 years to pay those off. So we intend from here on out to pay our MetCAD fees in full each year. So where we stand, we're building a foundation for our future. It's a combination of continuing to reduce some spending, increasing revenue, and investing in people. And by that I mean we want to invest our resources strategically in our staff to make sure they have the tools, the education they need to do their job the very best they can. And we'll also want to be in a broader sense, investing in the people of Urbana in terms of providing jobs and making sure people have opportunities to participate in our growth and development. So this year we are we're putting together service inventories. We're looking at the services each department provides, and then departments are prioritizing those, and we'll be allocating resources based on those. We're going to be continuing our focus on economic development, producing job opportunities, growth of our tax base. Many of our major revenue sources depend either on our population or tax base, and we fell behind over the last 10 to 12 years in both categories, and we are making a concerted effort to catch up. We'll be also looking at new revenue options or increasing our current revenue options. We haven't identified those yet, but that's going to be part of what we'll be looking at in this year's budget as well. What we can be proud of is we've maintained a stable city property tax rate for years, and we will continue to do so. And we're carrying minimal debt compared to most other cities. So that gives us a great deal of flexibility and options as we're looking at potentially financing major infrastructure projects in the future. This year, while this presentation is focused on mainly on financial issues, I think it's important to talk about them in the context of everything else we've done this year, and it's been a very, very busy and productive year. We've had transitions in most of our major leadership positions. Carol Mitten came on as city administrator in June. Our fire chief retired in the spring, and we have the new fire chief hired. Our police chief retired in August, and we appointed, or you approved appointment of an interim police chief. We're currently searching for a public works director. Bill Gray retired in October, and you named community development services director in June as well. Well, about every department except finance has changed this year, and we're looking forward to a stable year next year. But each one of these transitions represents an enormous investment of time and effort, in some cases money, for filling these positions, and that's also important in the context here. Planning initiatives. We are undergoing several major planning initiatives. First of all, we've engaged a firm to to conduct a facilities master plan. That'll take place over 2 years. The first part of that, the first phase of that involves conditional assessment of all the buildings. The team has already been here. They've gone through all the buildings, so we should be getting a report on that first phase very shortly. They were very efficient. Second phase is looking at is a programming needs assessment where it involves, again, visiting, talking with staff, seeing how people work together, doing a lot more input from people. And then the third phase is a master plan and an actual master plan. That will help us make decisions about use of resources, people, and that sort of thing in the future. We also have to update our stormwater master plan. The last time that was done was in the early 1980s, and a whole lot has changed, including climate. So not only are we looking at infrastructure and needs, but also how to manage stormwater given the changes we're seeing in weather patterns and that sort of thing. So this is long overdue. We received funding from the State Department of Transportation with a local match from Carle Hospital to study an extension of the Kickapoo Rail Trail from East Urbana through downtown Urbana over to Lincoln Avenue. This has the potential to be a major recreational economic boon to the city. This will be done in conjunction with the Urbana Park District, the Regional Planning Commission, and our own staff. Again, it requires a significant investment of staff time on this effort as well as all of these other efforts. And then we wrapped up the first phase of the What's in Your Square visioning effort for the Lincoln Square site. Staff are working with some very talented interns to compile those results, and hopefully we'll have those ready to share very shortly, and then they will help inform the next phase of planning for this site. So while we are, making reductions in some areas, we are also laying the groundwork for the future in a lot of other ways. So again, to build toward the future. Whoops, I need to go forward, not backwards. That should be entitled Programming Initiatives. We have some basic programs in place that help support growth and development in Urbana. The Enterprise Zone, which includes our Think Urbana program, incentivizes residential and commercial new construction. We also have the tax increment financing redevelopment incentives, the TIP redevelopment agreements, and then we have business development and opening grants available to businesses in the TIP districts and on Philo Road. Those all are used to incentivize projects of various sorts. I just wanted to touch on a few of the highlights. This is just a sampling of the kinds of projects that have been brought forward, completed, incentivized this year, and I think it gives a good, kind of a good overview of the breadth of what we have. These on this page represent the expansion or reuse of existing buildings. We were delighted to welcome the Busey Wealth Management Group back to home base in downtown Urbana, and it brought at least 75 jobs in the wealth management division back to the bank on Race and Main. We were very happy to see that happen. Chateau Normand is a wonderful historic preservation effort which renovated a former sorority into, I think it's 18 or 19 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, just amazing apartments, which really preserved the exterior and a lot of the interior architectural elements of the building. Broadway Food Hall took a warehouse-type space and turned it into the first downstate food hall in the state of Illinois, and that's really revitalized the North Broadway Avenue area. And the Cohen Building was purchased and is being reutilized, and a Japanese restaurant, for one thing, is slated to be moving into there soon. So those kinds of things were all supported through our economic development incentives. Some of the new construction that we've seen was at the corner of Nevada and Lincoln, a multifamily building. Under construction on Lincoln Avenue at the former water company site is the Retreat, the townhome-style apartments. There's a project slated for North Urbana jointly with Champaign called Union Gardens near the corner of basically 4th and Bradley. And then we'll be considering later tonight the project just north of the city building here, which are townhome-style apartments at 200 South Vine. So these are just some of the projects announced really in the last few months for the city of Urbana. We have a commitment to also provide affordable housing in Urbana, both in different locations and different styles. The project that was announced recently that was very exciting is the Urbana Arts Center for our downtown. It's with Bryn Shore Development. This is a 4-story, 44-unit apartment building that includes work-live studios. It's affordable housing. There will be public performance and gathering space and the first tiny home neighborhood in the Champaign-Urbana community. They'll be applying for low-income tax credits this year. Probably we'll hear later toward the end of the year, and we'll see how that goes. Champaign County Housing Authority also has plans to build a 24-unit apartment building on Colorado Avenue, targeting seniors and persons with disabilities. The Housing Authority is also going to be developing the site on Learman Avenue that was the home of the former Urbana townhomes. That will also be affordable housing. And then TWG is in the process of renovating, I believe it's around 130 units on Aspen Court in East Urbana. The most recent project that was announced is by Rail Development Corporation at the corner of Lincoln Avenue and University Avenue for extended stay hotel rooms, multifamily apartments, and a few townhomes south of Clark Street. So this project will stretch from University on the north to the half of the block south of Clark Street. Also supporting all these projects is some of the infrastructure around them. Probably the biggest, most noticeable project underway now is the MCOR project, which is a multi-year project in conjunction with Champaign, the University of Illinois, the Mass Transit District, and the City of Urbana. The final phase of that project is the reconstruction of Green Street between Lincoln Avenue and Race Street. This means that Green Street will become the main connection between campus and our downtown, and it will completely transform the appearance and function of that street. The Kickapoo Rail Trail is another important concept or part of our commitment to connectivity. Not only will it extend the rail trail that goes east eventually to the Danville area, but it also, as it moves through Urbana, will connect a lot of neighborhoods across the city, and the university, and eventually, hopefully, extends west through Champaign. So it's a good way to connect our community by bike and walking and as a recreational trail. We are going to be University Avenue. The Department of Transportation intends to spend close to $8 million to improve University Avenue from Wright Street on the west to Maple Street on the east, I believe. This will be resurfacing. It will address sidewalks. It'll address traffic lights, crosswalks, and a lot of it is geared toward improving safety for pedestrians and vehicles on this street. And that's increasingly important as we see more residential development along University Avenue. So that's a really timely improvement and much needed, and it will completely transform the appearance of that street as well. And slated this year in our capital improvement plan are resurfacing on Lincoln Avenue from Green Street north, and my personal favorite, Springfield Avenue from Gregory on the west to, I believe it's Kohler, approximately on the east. And this is probably the most teeth-chattering section of street we have right now. So that is slated for resurfacing as well. So it'll be a smoother ride in Urbana, hopefully later this year. Other good news and this is just a smattering of the openings and expansions we experienced in Urbana. A&R Mechanical, which is a long-time Urbana business, had over $1 million, well, I'm not going to put a price, I can't remember the price exactly, but greatly expanded their enterprise. JX Enterprises on Peterbilt will be locating up where the Hanford Inn was, on North 45. Plastic Container Corporation, Roanoke Concrete, both have expanded or built up on the North Lincoln Avenue area. The Poison Control Center, which has been located in Sunnycrest for many, many years, the National Poison Control Center with the ASPCA, has expanded, and it's one of those businesses that a lot of people don't know exist in Urbana, but they are a huge presence in the Sunnycrest Mall and have been for many years, and we're very happy that they're there. And you can bring your pet to work there, so it's a great place to work. And our small business and development grants, which are range from $1,000 to $3,000, have spurred the growth and creation of dozens of small businesses, and we're seeing those in places like the CoLab, the Collider workspace, and increasingly in the IMC. So small businesses get counseling through the SBD, Small Business Development Center, or other places, and then are eligible for, and if they meet other criteria, they're eligible for these small business grants. And we recently expanded some opportunities along Philo Road. So that has led to the opening of, actually the creation of dozens of new businesses this past year. Lastly, another internal focus has been improving the efficiency with which we do our work. The biggest citywide effort has been the adoption of a completely new financial software system. So we've moved from, I would say, like the Stone Age to the 21st century in that our data's in the cloud, it's much more secure, and we've adopted an entirely new financial software system. And Elizabeth and her team led the effort on that, and with the support of IT, and really every department was involved, so that was a huge accomplishment. Community development is adopting the use of another software, Citizen Serve. You can now also pay your rental registration online, and Public Works has is using Lucity, which allows work orders and that sort of thing to go electronic as well. So we're getting away from paper-based filing systems to computer-based record keeping and that sort of thing, and all of which are long-term necessary to improve efficiency. Short-term, it meant an enormous input of staff time and effort to make this happen, but it happened. So there we are. And I'll turn it back to Elizabeth.
I probably should have titled this slide disclaimer, because that's really what it is. So I need you to understand that I don't have a crystal ball in my office. I can't really predict the future. There's many factors that affect our financial path that are just simply beyond our control. So for this forecast, what you really need to pay attention to are trends. That's much more important than the details. Just kind of focus on the big picture. What we really want to do is use this to determine a general strategy. And our goal is really to make some corrections and tweaks on our budget to keep us on the right path. Also, the focus here is exclusively on the city's general fund. We have many city funds, and some of those we actually do separate kind of multi-year forecasts. For example, the Equipment Services Fund, to make sure that the internal charges we do are adequate to keep that fund sustainable. So one of the key financial trends, and we talked about this last year, was sales tax. So this chart shows you state sales tax in green and home rule sales tax in blue, and these are adjusted for inflation and changes in tax rates. If we didn't do that on the home rule side particularly, you'd see a lot of jumping around, because we have increased rates, I think, at least twice in the last 10 years. So one thing that's important to note is that sales tax revenue is nearly a third of all of our general fund revenue. It's about 28%. And that's a big deal, because sales tax revenue can be very volatile. when we hit that next recession, which is certainly going to happen. I can't say precisely when. It's probably going to be impacted pretty significantly. In recent years, the growth in sales tax revenue just hasn't been keeping pace with inflation, and yet our costs most certainly keep pace with inflation. A lot of that is due to the increasing use of e-commerce, but it's also affected by the state imposition of a collection fee. That's not what they call it, but it's a collection fee on home rule sales tax revenue. So if you look at the home rule sales tax in FY20, out here at the end, what I'm projecting for FY20 is really only about where it was back here in FY15 and 16 when it's adjusted for inflation. State sales tax looks a little bit better. The main thing that you need to understand about why that might be is that the base for the state sales tax is different than the base for home rule sales tax. So it includes some things, particularly what they call titled tangible personal property, which for us means mostly auto sales. So the trend can be a little bit different between the two. In terms of the state situation, we have a new governor, but the situation really hasn't changed, at least at this point. Some of the reductions were curtailed for the current fiscal year, but we're still getting less state shared revenue than we did 2 years ago. So in FY 2018, the state diverted 10% of the income tax that gets shared with local governments. In FY 2019, that diversion is 5%. They frame it as, well, we increased your revenue, and I think of it as, no, we're still getting less than we got 2 years ago. And also that collection fee on home rule sales tax, and there's been some other minor things that affect our revenues. But the main thing to remember is the state still has this enormous pension debt problem. Their debt is mushrooming. It's getting higher all the time. I think they're one notch above junk bond status. And so in the big picture, they've got to find a way to fix this problem, and that's probably going to involve some kind of diversion of local government revenues. Not sure exactly when, but I think that will happen. As we look at the forecast graphs, there's a couple of primary indicators that we use to help you understand the picture. So one of those is looking at recurring expenditures as a percentage of recurring revenue. That tells us really, are we able to sustain the programs and services that are part of our budget currently? Can we maintain our commitments? And also, as the mayor pointed out, our current policy is that we budget recurring expenditures at not more than 98.5% of recurring revenues, which is a smart thing to do, because then if our revenues fluctuate, as we know can happen, we're still in a good position. We also look closely at fund balance as a percentage of recurring expenditures. That goes to our ability to withstand downturns, respond to disasters, things like that. And again, as the mayor mentioned, our current policy is that our fund balance should be 15% of recurring expenditures. Arguably, it could be higher, and that would be something we might take up at budget time. So whenever you look at a forecast, you always think in terms of risk. Of course, we're going to focus on the likely scenario, and we think that that's based on assumptions that are most probable. There's very little chance that we're going to see a best case scenario, where everything goes our way. The risk of the worst case scenario, though, I think is relatively high just because of the state situation and how much that potentially impacts us. So we're going to plan for the likely scenario, but in the back of our minds, we're always going to be thinking about that worst case and how we might deal with it. So this chart shows you for the likely scenario, recurring revenues and expenditures. So here in FY19, we've got the revenues in green and expenditures in blue. You can see that our recurring revenues are higher than our recurring expenditures. That's where we want to be. But the other thing you're going to notice about this, as we go along, that flips around until in FY22, our recurring expenditures are higher than our recurring revenues, and then that gap starts to grow the other way. That's fundamentally what our problem is. That's our structural deficit right there. We also take a look at how fast recurring revenues and expense are growing, because clearly, if recurring revenues are not growing as fast as recurring expenditures, we're not going to have a balanced budget for the long term. So here in green, you see our recurring revenues. There's a little blip in there in FY 2022, and that's when we expect that the state would take the 2020 census results and then apply those to our revenues that are shared on a per capita basis, which is mostly income tax and use tax. And then all throughout, we have recurring expense growing faster than recurring revenue. Towards the end, that gap starts to come together a little bit, and largely that is related to, well, I'm not going to say largely, but partly that's related to growth in the tax base that we expect as a result of development projects that are in the pipeline now. So if we look at fund balance, and on this slide I show you all the scenarios. The green line in the middle is the likely scenario. You can see that in that scenario we're kind of level, and we're staying level, fairly level for a while. That's because that's the time period where, well, I'm going to take that back. That eventually, over time, what you see is that starts to tail off. And if we didn't do anything, if we just let it go and go and go, we'd get to zero. You can see in the worst case, we do get to zero during the 5-year period. And the best case, that blue line, you know, fund balance grows and grows, but again, highly unlikely. So looking at the likely scenario a little more closely for fund balance, you can see the blue bars represent where we would expect our fund balance to be. The white line is our policy of 15% of recurring expenditures. And again, that tails off by the end and starts to decline. And that decline, if we ran this out further, would continue. So then the question is, okay, so what do we have to do to make this right, to make this work? And so I ran some simulations where I said, okay, if we adjust revenues and expenditures, here's what we can expect. So the simulations I'm going to show you include both expenditure reductions and revenue increases. 1 million in expenditure reductions over 2 years, 1 million in revenue increases over 3 years. There's a lot of ways we could do this, but I think the main thing to focus is total of revenue increases and expenditure reductions of $2 million over 3 years. And doing that in steps, so here we recommend doing this over 3 years in total, allows us to take time to consider the changes that we're going to make, and also to take account of things that might change the forecast. So when we do that correction that I just mentioned, you can see this is the same chart you looked at before, but it's adjusted. Recurring revenues, again in green, recurring expenditures in blue, and throughout the whole 5-year period, we don't have the recurring expenditures higher than recurring revenues. They're getting close, they're edging up, which shows me we still have a problem, but it's a much better situation. And then this shows, same chart you saw before, but with the corrections, shows the growth in recurring revenue and expenditure. And again, they're much closer. Not quite there, but much closer. Close enough to think that perhaps by the end, with other changes that might occur in the next 5 years, that we might get there. And this is the fund balance. So throughout the whole 5 years, you see fund balance growing. The white line there shows our current policy of 15% of recurring expenditure. The dotted line I put on there just to show you 25%, which is, as the mayor said, probably a more typical level for a community of our size. And that does seem to be achievable. And in fact, our fund balance even grows beyond that. Clearly, we wouldn't just continue to let the fund balance build and build and build. We have many, many needs, and it would be perfectly appropriate to take some of that money and use it for one-time expenditures like capital improvements.
So there's sort of two stages to the recommended strategy, but the top line message of what we're facing is that we're going to do less with less, because when we cut expenditures, that means we're cutting services. So, as the mayor said when she was talking about where we stand today, the Foundation for the Future has three components. We reduce spending, we increase revenues, and we invest in our people. So one of the things that we're doing with our people is we're sharing this forecast with them. I know that the mayor and Elizabeth did that last year. We're doing that again, and we're also asking for their input. So Elizabeth said, as far as the corrective actions go, she modeled what increased revenues and decreased expenses could look like, but then we have to actually figure out what does that mean in terms of operationalizing that. So what we've done so far is each department and their management team has developed a list of a service inventory, and those are general fund services, and they're discrete things to consider. And then we're going to rack and stack those according to a set of priorities that we're working through. We're going to evaluate revenue options, and we've been getting suggestions from senior staff as well as frontline staff for things that we could consider. And then we're going to look at alternative methods of service delivery, and that's another thing that our staff can give us input on. But it all means that there will be limited increases for our current programs and services. Longer term, as Elizabeth said, the plan is to build reserves and to consider perhaps increasing the minimum fund balance as a percentage of our recurring expenditures. And we need to continue to make growing our EAV and our population priorities, because that's how we're going to grow and stabilize over time. So we will create our new reality. And economic development opportunities drive long-term revenue. And it also drives our ability to grow our population. And this focus on financial stability, which in the short term is difficult, but it will serve us well in the future, and it's providing an opportunity for some very candid conversations with our staff, but it gives them a chance to buy into what's happening and help them also participate in creating our new reality. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Who's the chair?
Bill,
I'm chair, or you're calling on me?
I'm calling on you.
Okay.
This is the remote chair.
Just a couple of questions. I noticed you said the IMRF revised assumptions about investment earnings. Will our police and fire pensions, how does that match? And will we be adjusting our assumptions as well, or is that kind of every year we do that?
Yeah, so for police and fire pensions, we do an actuarial report every year to determine the funding that we're going to allocate and the tax levy, and so that's a normal part of that review process. That particular assumption doesn't get adjusted often, but it may be one that the board decides needs to be adjusted. But I think what the IMRF board chose to do is probably appropriate, given that long-term returns are not what they were, at times in the past.
Although I guess the cash rates are a little bit higher, get a little more interest on what we have to put in cash, but yeah, doesn't make up for it.
Yeah, but I think that results in, we expect a 1.6% increase in our contribution rate every year, probably for 3 years, and that's significant.
Okay, and then as far as the development goes, I think something the council might be able to contribute to is we haven't looked at the TIF incentives, I think, in 7 or 8 years. We want to make sure we aren't incentivizing things that would have happened anyway, or things that would just be competing with things we already have, or somebody just move across town. I think we have policies against incentivizing people to move across town, but there's certain things we incentivize with the incentives, and I wonder if maybe we should take a look to see if those are still relevant after that time. And maybe the other kind of automatic incentive programs to make sure that they're performing and we aren't incentivizing things that would have happened on their own, because that can really add up to a big hit. And one thing I came across looking at Airbnb, I know some cities have agreements with Airbnb to collect taxes on the rooms that rent out from that city. It's a direct relationship, I guess, with Airbnb. Do we have something like that?
So we've actually been looking at it, and actually our attorney here did some review for me, and there are probably some things that we need to address before we can do that. One is that our zoning ordinance doesn't technically allow that use, and so we probably can't tax something that we don't actually allow. So we'll be looking to Lori for some help with that. But ultimately, yes, that's on our list of revenue options that we're going to investigate.
Okay, and then just one more on the assumptions for growth or for expenses, since I guess we're assuming we're going to be growing a little bit, 0.5% in population, and hopefully with this economic development we'll have other growth happening. And the expenses seem to the assumptions just be based on CPI, is that right? So as we grow, will there be additional expenses, like have to hire more police department or something like that?
That's possible. I mean, right now, what we're seeing based on the Census Bureau estimates is the growth is really sort of small. It's about 0.5% annually. But if we were to get to see more rapid growth in population, that might be something that we would have to take a look at. I mean, we want to, there are certain services we're going to provide probably no matter what, and we want to provide the right level of service, so we don't want people to get less service, I think, as our population grows. For some things that might be okay, but for some it won't be.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Dean?
So Elizabeth, South Dakota versus Mayfair. Has the state given any indication to maybe to the municipal league or to any people in your position if we're ever going to see sales tax on the internet?
So we won't actually see sales tax, we'll see use tax. So based on the South Dakota versus Wayfair decision in the Supreme Court, the state passed in the budget implementation bill for FY 2019 the legislation that enabled them to begin collecting. And that what will happen is that will be only on the state rate, not on the home rule rate, and it will go into a pot for use tax. And then a portion of use tax revenue is distributed to municipalities on a per capita basis. So we'll see some benefit from that. And I built that into the assumptions. That just took effect October 1st. And so because of the lag in the time before the retailers report that to the state and they process and turn it over to us, just in January was the first month we would see any impact of that decision, and so it's very difficult to estimate at this point.
Maybe a year off or two years off before
I think we'll get a better picture as we go through this fiscal year even. The Municipal League provided some estimates, for the per capita distribution, and those are what I used, but I think a lot of us are feeling like potentially it could be better than that. We don't want to count on that at this point, though.
There's also a bill that was just introduced by, I think, Representative Murphy or Senator Murphy from Springfield. It's a destination-based online sales tax, and I don't know exactly the details of that, but there's some potential for that as well, and it means that the sales tax is based on the destination of a package ordered, where it's delivered, basically. Which
currently it's the retailers are going to pay the rate in the state they're located in, and they're going to pay that rate up to Illinois. Is that what you?
No, they're going to pay Illinois'.
They're going to pay
But
Illinois' rate.
With the
Rates.
destination, it includes the local home rule sales tax.
Yeah, the
So-
big benefit of that is we would capture our home rule sales tax, which we're not currently.
Wayfair just has the state sales tax. So we're looking into supporting that in a big way.
Well, I look forward to it because I think the playing field needs to be leveled, so I'm glad to see it passed.
It's killing us, yeah,
All right,
online
thank you.
sales. Eric?
Yeah. So this is a hard question, I think, but where, I don't see much fat in the services we provide, either public works or public safety, or you talked about cutting, but I don't know where.
Can I?
Sure.
It's going to hurt. It's going to show. So that's what we're trying to go through a process that is internally as transparent as possible. And we're literally going service by service, and we've come up with a set of questions to ask about, is this an essential function of government type of question? Can people obtain this service through another mechanism? Ranking according to a set of priorities that are largely reflective of council goals, and to try to find where are the likely suspects. I mean, there are some, but people will notice a change. There isn't any fat in what we do. Every service we provide reflects a goal or a value of the city of Urbana. And so we're trying to find what are those essential activities that speak to those goals and values, and some that are more in the nicety category as opposed to the necessity category are the ones that we're going to focus on.
And in the past, and some of us have been on the council for a number of years, when we were faced with this sort of dilemma, we could turn to increasing revenues. We've maxed out all the taxes we can. All the utility taxes are at the maximum allowed by law. We can't, other more optional taxes, we have to remain competitive with our surrounding neighbors. We want to keep our property tax rate stable, so there aren't any short-term solutions anymore. We have to start looking at this from a realistic standpoint, and in the long term, we're going to be fine. We're going to come out stronger, but in the short term, there will be some painful decisions, and that's where everyone has to participate as well. But we're still in the process of the inventory at this point.
If I could ask one more question, what is the estimated population increase based on new residential development? If over the next, let's say, 2 years, if you add up the, a couple of them may or may not happen, but if you add up the rail and the North Vine and the other development on the northwest corner of University and Lincoln, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it'll be years, a couple of years
Couple of
before
years.
those show up, and then we have the 2020 census. So that's going to be a delayed impact. Long term, it'll be absolutely a good thing.
Do you think that we're talking about 1,000 new people, perhaps? Is that excessive, or is that
No, I
order
don't
of magnitude about right?
Yeah, but what we need to remember is how this works at the state. So the state makes this adjustment only after they receive the results of the decennial census. So the 2020 census is going to happen before many of those projects are complete, and then that's not going to really affect our state shared revenues until the 2030 census.
Well, we did do a special census when Savannah Green came, and so there's that option. So I wouldn't wait till 2030.
Yeah, I think you need to achieve some critical mass
Yeah.
before it makes sense, because a special census has a cost.
We are catching up. We had very little growth in 10 or 12 years, and the communities around us experienced significantly more. Champaign County as a whole, but Urbana didn't participate in that population growth that some of the other communities experienced. But the trend, we're now seeing, especially with the Think Urbana program, I think our share of residential building permits in 2015 was 9%, and it was 19%. It went from 9 to 19%. So, we're starting to recapture some of that growth that other communities have experienced, but we're catching up. So it's that catching up period that we're in now. Jared?
Elizabeth, I think in the past when we've gotten the forecast, we've also seen our timeline for now till budget. What's coming up next?
Oh. I don't remember doing that in the past, but so
Maybe
as
it's just something I asked you for.
well, as Carol mentioned, we've been working on this service inventory, so we're actively working on that. We're also beginning to evaluate revenue options. Beginning of February, departments will start to work on what we call their baseline budget for current services. And so I would say without the schedule in front of me, I'm guessing a little bit, but early April, we'll be wanting to make those tentative decisions about what are the reductions going to be, what are the new revenues, and probably much like last year, we'll go through a process of briefing council members. And we're planning to present the budget to council, I want to say mid-May. Then we'll probably have several evenings where we discuss specific topics related to the budget.
But we're not going to see anything until May or April on this topic, or are
Yeah.
you going to give us a report again between now and then?
Probably not. We'll
Okay.
probably do some briefings in April, and then you'll see the budget in May. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
This is going to be fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
This
Coach.
is online, right? Mhm. Yeah. If people want to get a copy of the financial forecast, it's included in the council packet for tonight's meeting, so it's available online.
That's an interesting question. Well, she removed it. She's very public
Okay, we'll continue with public input. Let's see, Gina Peluso on the redevelopment of 200 Vine Street.
Hi again. Why speak once when you can speak twice? My name's Gina Peluso, and I live just up the street. Again, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And thanks for everybody that read the email that I sent that had 1 million questions on it. Thanks to those that responded. And again, just thanks for your time and looking them over. As I mentioned earlier, I just have some concerns about the redevelopment deal as pertains to the ambiguities that I think I heard at the City Council meeting last week. There were a lot of questions that were asked that was like, well, we're not really sure yet. That's not really defined yet. We don't really know yet. It just seems a little bit like the cart before the horse as far as getting more public input on this design, possibly, and I know that was pretty much shot down. It sounded like the developer was hoping that people would be here last week to talk about that, and not too many people showed up. I just have a lot of concerns. Oh, one thing, when you're talking about incentives and Think Urbana, can we maybe add some kind of incentives to get people to purchase and rehab older homes? Which is something that's near and dear to my heart. I guess that a lot of the things that were talked about, what is the cost to convert some of these condos into accessible units? Who's going to bear that cost? Is it going to be the developer? Is it going to be the leasee? There's really not much green space. I live on Vine Street, and my house sits a good 20 feet back from the road. I can't imagine living right on the sidewalk and having the plow push all the snow into my front windows and my front door, and I know that happens. Those plows come down Vine Street, and that stuff's all over the place. The noise from this building, from the fire and the police and the emergency responders, You know, again, my house sits 20 feet back, but I hear it, and I can't imagine being right next door to it. Is there sound mitigation that's going to be built in? The homestead exemption that the developer said, well, they might take a look at doing that in the future, that's another tax incentive. No one asked about what the savings will be in the sales tax that will be exempted. So, I mean, we're looking at $1.02 million in property, another $0.45 million in incentives. So right there, we're at about $1.5 million, plus whatever else this might come into, whatever else this might add up to. I'm not saying I don't want to see that block developed, because I think it needs to be developed. It's been undeveloped for a long time, and I was sad to see all those old houses go and all the trees that used to be there. I just want to make sure that we're making the best decision possible for Urbana, and I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Scott Dossett.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I haven't seen most of you, I think, in 2019. And I certainly haven't seen Sharice Hersey, so I wanted to welcome you to the council. Whether or not you're related to her or not, if you have as productive and as fun and rewarding time as Betty Hersey did up at King School, where I volunteered a bit when my wife taught up there, then you'll have a good time here, and so I hope all of that comes true.
Thank you.
Before I get started on the Vine thing, and I've just got a couple of comments for that, one of the costs for letting me sit while you did the financial forecast is I thought of other things to say to you during public input. But I did want to thank everyone for the efforts of the city, and particularly Mayor Marlin, regarding the Martin Luther King celebrations through the weekend and the ones that were going on. I was real proud in the activity that we were able to contribute from the start of the event at Vineyard on Friday to the events at Cranard and the things that were happening out through the weekend. And I think anyone who saw Reverend, I believe, Flieger, yeah, thank you for the help there, knows that there are still many things that we need to move forward with in terms of the way we reckon ourselves, to the recognize in ourselves and in our culture the continued inequities that we have. And I wanted to mention to you quickly something that I did of the third week of last month. You may or may not know that the members of the Civilian Police Review Board here in Urbana all belong to something called NACOL. It's the National Association for the Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And I did a webinar with them last month that was kind of just a description of a Denver, Colorado program called Bridging the Gap. And I'm quoting from one of their web pages. It seeks to proactively improve relationships between youth and law enforcement in Denver by educating youth on their rights and responsibilities when in contact with law enforcement, and educating officers on key aspects of adolescent development and de-escalation techniques when contacting youth. And so I'll be sending y'all a URL to hit their webpage. This is something they're kind of rolling out on the road in Colorado, but I really thought it was worthwhile. You know, some of the pictures of the kids kind of meeting with the cops and kind of developing some core understandings about where everybody was really, to me, pretty refreshing and pretty hopeful. So that's something that we could try to do more in our city. So anyway, on to 1000 South Vine. I want to signal a real appreciation to Green Street Realty regarding flexibility on their design. I think they responded to the HUNA, Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association, criticism that we provided in probably as reasonable and functional as they could, given their realities of design and profit. And I really want to thank community development staff and council work, to make this thing move forward. I appreciate Gina's discussion and the questions she had, and it kind of made me wish I had got that email, but I didn't. The big issues that remain to me, beyond the ones that you guys will face vis-a-vis, maybe some of the design stuff and of course, the big questions about money, it does pain me to think we're giving away $1.5 million and deferring property taxes for 5 years, at least partially. But the big issues that remain to me have continued to be the integration into the neighborhood. So, how is this going to affect that half-block fringe or so past Urbana Avenue, and critical safety concern about crossing Vine Street. I live on East High Street, just about a block away from here, and it gets to be a madhouse here, especially when you have things like emergency vehicle response and that kind of thing. So I'm really hoping that in the medium-term planning, you can look at traffic calming or pedestrian assistance across Vine Street. I'm afraid there is an accident waiting to happen there. And that is my sole biggest concern about this development moving forward. So again, thank you very much. Thank you all very much for what you do. Ms. Hersey, welcome to the council. And
thank you.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Thanks, Scott. Next up, Steve Beckett. You were here first. I should have called you first. I apologize.
That's okay. My name is Steve Beckett. My wife and I own the property at 508 South Broadway. The property was acquired in 1991. For those who are not familiar with the history of the property, that actually was at that corner where these the ordinance 2019-01-009, 504 South Broadway. At that corner, that was Judge Weber's house, and Marilyn Thies grew up there as a girl, and I remember it when I used to go to Urbana High School, obviously a long time ago, and then those blocks were entirely residential. Sometime in the 1960s, the Illinois Crop Improvement Association was built. That's the property that we acquired in 1991. From 1991 to the present, it's been a professional building. It's always housed a law office. It currently has Beckett Law Office. And Broadway at that location, of course, on the other side of the street, the PNC Bank, I can't remember what it was, I think it was First National before, but became PNC, and it has professional offices as well. We've always tried to be good neighbors. We really like Market Square. We have a parking lot on the east side of our building, which we readily make available as overflow parking for people who come to Market Square, which obviously is very, very popular. We're all of us Urbanites are very, very proud of it. I support the rezoning of these two parcels to make them consistent with 508 South Broadway. I was president at the Planning Commission. I did express concern about the other parcel, which I understood has been withdrawn, and I think that's good. So I support the rezoning. I reluctantly, or that's where I cautiously support the development plan. I'm hoping that the use of the Arts Center and the teeny houses is consistent with other businesses right there in the area, and I appreciate what city staff did. I appreciate the opportunity to have input, and I hope you'll support it. I'm an early riser, and I won't be here for the vote.
Bill, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. We haven't looked at the details of that proposal. It's a proposal, and I share kind of interest in what's going to happen with the teeny houses. But I did want to thank you for shoveling your sidewalk. I walk here tonight, and yours is in great shape. And I really appreciate a nice, solid place to walk.
We truly do try to be conscious of that. That's a heavily used sidewalk.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Last input for tonight, Ilona Makowski on the 200 South Line project.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Ilona Markowski. I live at 507 East Green Street, very close to the proposed Green Street realty development. I'm here tonight to speak in opposition to this development, and I will just read my statement in the interest of time. Although I appreciate the fact that the original design was replaced, unfortunately the new one is not any better, but simply another bad design. I will be speaking from an urban design viewpoint, which is what my interest is. Overall, the building gives the appearance of a city-edge low-budget housing project, not a building that should be located in downtown by one of the city's gateway points, Cunningham Avenue, and in view of the federal and the historic county courthouses. What I do see as problematic with this building in this particular location is that in the very center of the what do I see as a problem with this building in the very center of the historic downtown of Urbana? The most visible and overwhelming large problem is the design of the walls, which appear fort or prison-like, reminiscent of Babylonian fortification walls. The bricks are depressingly dark, and the use of siding, not only for the interior courtyard, but also for large areas of the exterior walls, make the building look cheap. The windows are flat, dark holes in the walls without any definition, another cheap feature. Worst of all are the entrance doors, which appear to be dark, cheap, solid doors with tiny single holes for windows, the kind of doors one sees on the backs of bars and restaurants right next to the dumpsters. To make things worse, the doors are hiding in dark spaces created by the crenulated walls. It is most unfortunate that the design also lacks landscaping, especially trees along Vine Street, which would not only make the streetscape more pleasant and compatible with the existing landscaping of Tree City Urbana, but would at least cover the unsightliness of the building. The electric wires crossing directly over the courtyard further reduce the aesthetic qualities of the space created by this project. I believe that there is not really a single redeeming feature about this design that would merit its placement in the location it is designed for, and the exceptionally generous financial help the city is offering to the developer. Urbana not having done any new construction in downtown in the last 20 years, this project could be the start of a new trend designed to correct the many architectural and landscape mistakes made in the last 50 years in Urbana, which had rendered the city into a place of disconnected, uninviting spaces and the city with no character, unable to attract people and businesses. Unfortunately, the proposed project is definitely not the kind of development that will solve these spatial and social problems in Urbana, or even one that I would be proud to show to visitors. Just two recent and very nice examples of real downtown development near the local courthouse may be seen on Google Map at 310 South Street and 415 Columbia Street in the nearby city of Lafayette, Indiana, where they clearly understood the difference between a downtown development and a low-budget city-edge development. Ideally, I would like to see a completely different, elegant downtown building and landscaping at this place, but at this point this seems quite unlikely. Alternatively, if the developer would simply transplant the design of his new building at Lincoln and Nevada Streets, save for the terrible front doors there too, we would already be 100% better off. Could something like that happen? Short of that, please use lighter, more reddish bricks that match the federal and county courthouses instead of the brown bricks. Use brick throughout, at least the exterior walls. Define the windows, and most definitely install real front doors. With respect to landscaping, hide overhead electric wires underground and leave larger setbacks all around for trees, flowers, and grass. Finally, I would like to ask, is this really the best development the city can imagine for this central and prominent place in downtown? Is this the image we want to project of this city? Is this the design that will re-energize downtown and attract new people and businesses, which we so much desire? Please do not sell the city short. I would like to ask that you consider changes to this design before accepting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the Urbana City Council? Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. Seeing none, reports of standing committees. Chairman Brown.
Yeah, the Committee of the Whole met last week, forwarded several ordinances and a resolution to City Council, all with recommendation for approval. Before I start, I got a note that I'm supposed to remind people the sidewalks are slick out there, Scott. Don't fall. So I was supposed to remind people before they leave that the sidewalks are slick. We also have some minor editorial corrections that were passed out to council. Looks like 5 or 6 of them. But that's on the sheet before you, so I'll make a motion before we start on the ordinances to approve the minor editorial corrections to the ordinances and resolutions identified in the list the city clerk has distributed to the council members.
Second.
Did you make the motion, Bill?
You did.
So moved by
It's like, I thought you
Bill,
just did.
seconded by Eric. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay.
Okay, first we have ordinance number 2019-01-002, an ordinance vacating an alley, Church Alley, south of Elm Street between Cedar and Race Streets. It's the one at the library. For the committee, I move approval.
I will second that highly controversial issue. Just
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Hazen,
yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Next is ordinance number 2019.
Oh, okay, that motion passes.
Okay.
Yes, we have 6 votes.
Okay. Ordinance number 2019-01-003, an ordinance approving a bus shelter master license agreement with the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second it. I said it louder, but Mary Alice is first.
You had one already. Mary Alice gets this one. Okay. Any discussion on this? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Hazen,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Next is ordinance number 2019-01-004, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 8, omnibus. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Eric, and the mayor votes on this. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Hazen,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes.
Mayor Marlin.
Yes, that motion passes.
Next is ordinance number 2019-01-005, an ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement with Green Street Realty Company of Illinois and authorizing the sale of certain real estate, 200 block of South Vine Street, 300 block of East Green Street. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second it.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Jared. That will require 6 of 8 votes. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Mary Alice.
I just wanted to first thank the public, the staff, and everybody who's worked very hard on this project. I appreciate the amount of time that everybody has used to study them, present questions, the staff to answer them, and the developer to come here last week and also answer questions. Last week I had a number of questions that I felt quite satisfied that were answered by the developer. Specifically, I was concerned about the city's interest financially being covered. In regards to the contract that we had in front of us, Jim answered several questions, as did Chris and as did Brandon, so thank you very much for that. There's been a lot of conversation about the setback, and I just wanted to have a couple of different items that I wanted people to think about. First, I was calculating different items, and so the first item I calculated was the width of the sidewalk. So by the city code, the width of a sidewalk has to be 5 feet. In addition, there was in the drawings planters, so let's assume they're at least 3 feet. So we've got about 8 feet. I went outside during break to see how far our building is set back, which is on the exact building. And by measurement of my shoes, I measured 5 feet from the sidewalk. Generally speaking, when we look at the design overlay districts, we look at the block face, and we try and make sure that the buildings that are going to be adjacent on both sides of the block are very similar in terms of setback. So considering that our city setback is approximately 5 feet from the sidewalk, and considering that we will have planters in addition to the sidewalk, it's very similar. And last but not least, I would like to encourage the developer to work with the city arborist to figure out some good plantings, perhaps small trees that could be planted there to buffer the building. I noticed in front of our city we had about a 4 or 5 foot real skinny tree in front of our entrance. I'm not sure if those would be appropriate. I will leave that up to the professionals. But considering all of those different items, I am supportive of this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Eric?
Yeah, I just want to reinforce what Mary Alice said about involving the city arborist in advising developers on plantings. There's a very unfortunate tendency in many developments, and especially including the on campus, to plant monocultures that after a decade all catch the same infection and they all die. And you know, Mike can really help with that. So I think, in fact, since we were talking about the budget, the arborist is absolutely essential for Tree City, USA. So please be careful about whatever you do in that department. I will vote for this project. It's obvious that not every aspect of it is going to make everybody happy. But on balance, I think it's a really, really good thing for downtown, a really good thing for the city. I'm convinced from Brandon's analysis, I don't know if he wants to go through it again, but I'm convinced from Brandon's analysis that financially the level of incentive we're providing is a good investment for the city and is consistent with good practice for doing, you know, between cities and developers for doing downtown development. So I'm really, on balance, I'm really very happy with this project, and will certainly vote in favor of this ordinance.
Bill?
Yeah, I wanted to thank staff, first of all, for issuing a really good RFP early last year. I think it was all done in-house, right? And I thought it was
Libby Horwitz.
I thought it was really right on as far as what points it stressed and the way it represented us, and I understand it resulted in 7 responses, or 7 people interested, development companies interested, a couple of good responses, and hopefully some of those other 5 had at least started a relationship and maybe continued a relationship. So I think the good RFP made a big difference in extending our reach out to developers that are interested in those kind of projects and other downtown projects, hopefully. I'd also like to thank Green Street Realty. Chris Saunders has been really open about meeting with each council member once. I know early on that was a good meeting. I just had one concern, and that was about accessibility. I expressed it then, and I expressed it again last week. But I certainly understand that, you know, once the letter of intent is issued, there's a plan in place, and it takes a lot of redesign, a lot of expense to start changing things. But I do appreciate all the work he put into it, his availability, his presence here, his willingness to meet with all the neighborhood, and have the impossible job of taking 50 different ideas of what it should look like and try to come back with one final plan. So that was the process, and I think it's probably going to pass. So I think the process from that perspective will be successful. He also, I think, gave me at least, and hopefully others on council and staff, a better understanding of how these projects are packaged and turned into products for investors, and that's what drives financially really our development, is what people are willing to spend and what kind of return they can expect. So I think that's definitely helped understand that process, and hopefully that'll help us negotiate and see what kind of projects we can get going forward. I thought that the plan itself, it looks like it's going to be a quality built building, really functional. Personally, I miss having, I like the balconies on the Vine Street side in the first plan better. I thought it'd be nice to go out and have a cup of coffee and watch people setting up for the market and stuff like that Saturday mornings. But, you know, putting everything together and trying to come back with the plans, you have to give and take. And, you know, like I said, that's an impossible job. So everybody loses some, everybody gains some. I think in the end you have to think, is it done? Is it better? And I think it will be done, and I think it will be better than what's there. Couple of things I have a couple of little things. You know, little things tend to bother you. I like the covered bike parking. I didn't ask for it. I didn't think about asking for it, and I'm kind of embarrassed I didn't, because I should be on top of things like that. Most of the places have, I mean, if I was running, I'd probably run a garage and just park my bike in there. But, you know, you have visitors who are just going to be there for a little while. It's nice to be able to put your bike up and not have it rained on, get a rusty chain or something. I'm less impressed with putting solar panels on top of the cover for the bike parking. It's in a courtyard. I think the money would be better spent on bigger trees to have more interest in the courtyard. And trees and solar panels don't tend to mix very well. Besides the fact we're going to be approving something in a few minutes, hopefully, that will put about 15,540 solar panels on our landfills. So the extra 2 I don't think will be missed. So I'd encourage people not to put the 2 solar panels there and instead invest the money in trees. Other than that, I'm pretty satisfied. I would like to make an apology to my friends who are disabled. This project isn't going to be good for you. It's townhouses by default. Townhouses have steps, so that's the only regret I have, and that would have had to been addressed really early on. And I understand that.
I would address that concern. These a percentage of these units are adaptable, and per state and federal code, if in new construction, a tenant has a disability with ambulatory disability, they can request a lift to be installed, and that expense would be borne by the developer. Conversions, once the building is built, and after that, the costs are allocated between the tenant and the owner. The city has community development block grant funds that are available to assist with conversions to accommodate disabilities if tenants meet certain income criteria. So these units are adaptable, and they also are visitable per Urbana city code. So while they do have stairs, they can be outfitted with lifts to accommodate mobility issues, as well as can be adapted to accommodate other disabilities as well. Any other comments? Dean? Oh,
Well,
Eric.
Yeah,
Eric,
just a very quick one that I forgot. I also want to thank Chris Saunders for committing to make these solar ready. And I hope that's going to be a precedent in a variety of our developments when we're Tree City, and so there are a lot of places we can't do solar, but in developments like this, making these solar ready during construction is a step towards really doing a good job in that direction.
Thanks. Jared?
I know we've got a lot to go over, so I'll just try and keep it brief. I wanted to echo Eric's comments that and assure the public and those who are watching who will read about this tomorrow that I'm also absolutely convinced that this is the best move the city can make, considering all the things that we would have to consider on these things, the city's goals going forward, our financial forecasts, our financial outlook in general, and it's always it's a fine line, and I want to assure everyone that we all spent a lot of time discussing this, taking it into as much consideration as we really could, and I'm convinced that it is the right decision, and it will ultimately be a big step into moving us forward and providing us with a lot more opportunities to see new development and exciting developments, and ones hopefully that Bill will all make sure we're all aware of, asking for and looking for the things of the less advantageous in our communities. So I'm supporting this.
Dean.
Well, I won't take very long. I just want to thank the city staff also and the mayor for all your hours and working on this. I know it's been difficult to put it all together and try to make everybody happy. I'm very excited about the project, and I think it's going to be a key in the revitalization of downtown and getting the local economy moving. So thank you.
Sharice?
No.
Okay.
I almost feel compelled to say something.
You don't
because
have to.
everybody else did.
You don't have to. If you don't want to.
But I just got here.
It's okay. I'll wrap this up by following up. Thank you to everyone, especially the staff, and to Green Street Realty for taking a chance on this site. It does represent the first construction in downtown Urbana in over 13 years, and this project is bigger than just the 42 townhomes that are going to be built over here. It represents a turning point in our relationship with local development community, and it paves the way for other exciting changes in our community, not just downtown, but throughout our community. There's a lot hinging on this particular project, and I appreciate the effort that went into it. So with that, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Hazen,
Yes.
Percy,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Wu,
Yes.
Mayor Marlin.
Yes. That motion passes. Bill.
Next is ordinance number 2019-01-006, an ordinance approving and authorizing the second amendment to the new Lincoln Square parking agreement. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. Should I do it again?
Read it again.
Okay, sorry, my mic wasn't on. Ordinance number 2019-01-006, an ordinance approving and authorizing a second amendment to the new Lincoln Square parking agreement. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Mary Alice. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Hazen,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Next is resolution number 2019-01-001R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement, National Integrated Ballistic Information Network Equipment. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Eric. All those, do we need all those in favor, or do we need roll call?
Roll call.
Roll.
Roll
Roll
call
call.
everything.
Roll call? Okay.
Councilmembers Brown,
Yes.
Hazen,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
And finally, ordinance number 2019-01-007, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing number of Class BB liquor licenses for Analog Urbana LLC, doing business as Analog Urbana, 129 North Race Street, Urbana. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Oh, Dean.
Was that Dean? Okay. All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Hazen,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
The natives are getting wrecked.
A special thank you to Urbana City Council members for all your thoughtful consideration of these projects. Reports of officers. Seeing none. New business, ordinance number 2019-01-008. Lori Pearson, Planning Manager, Zoning Administrator.
This is the first of 3 planning items this evening, so just give me just a moment.
Make sure your mic's on.
Okay, so this first ordinance is for the solar energy system that City Council approved the lease for the landfill back in December of last year. So this is the special use permit to allow the use at this location. So it'd be the same operations that you learned about during the lease discussion. This is just for the use. So it did go to Plan Commission at their January 10th meeting. Unanimous recommendation for approval with 2 conditions. The standard condition about being consistent with the plan, and the second condition to set the maximum height at 15 feet, just in case there needs to be change out over the years, even though right now it's just estimated to be 8 feet. So staff would also recommend approval of this item.
And is the proper motion approval of the item with conditions?
It's in the ordinance, so
It's in
just
the
approval
ordinance,
of the
okay.
ordinance.
Is there a motion? We'll get this on the floor and then discuss. Mary Ellis.
I'll move approval of ordinance, planning case 2365 SU 18. I'm not sure what else I'm supposed to say on that one. Just looking at it. At 901 North Smith Road, the City of Urbana, plan case 2365 SU 18.
And it's ordinance 2019-01-008.
I'll second.
It's not on here, that's
Bill seconds it.
It's not on?
It's not on the
Not on the
memo.
document.
It's on the agenda.
Oh, it's on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm
It's on the
sorry.
agenda. Okay, good.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Let's Bill get that. Okay.
You seconded.
Discussion. We'll start with questions for Lori and then discussion. Bill.
Okay, so I'm excited about this project too. It currently is a landfill, closed landfill, and that's a special use in agriculture too, right? Also?
The landfill itself.
Yeah.
I'll need to check. At some point, part of this was rezoned in order to make the landfill more consistent with zoning.
Okay, so it's kind of like we'll have 2 special uses there, because it's still a landfill. It's got a lot of garbage in there. I found this PowerPoint's kind of interesting. I should send it out. From one of our former Public Works people that did a presentation on the landfill for some meeting, and it's like 70 or 80 feet deep with packed garbage from the 70s and 80s, which I'm kind of attached to because those were my college years, and I went to school here, so I know there's a lot of stuff. I know some of the stuff that's in there. So recycling wasn't this big back then. But you know,
sweat socks.
and like it's 30 feet below ground, 30 or 40 feet above ground, a couple feet of soil on top of that. So this is still a major thing there, and potential problems exist with it for many more decades, probably. They were getting better by that point as far as what you could put in there. So you weren't supposed to put motor oil and stuff like that in there. So my main concern really is, for one, how we treat what appears to be impervious surface. I know that underneath there's grass, and there's going to be like 10-foot rows between these things. So are we treating this as some percentage impervious, and will they have to do any kind of detention? It's a funny sort of thing because it's a landfill, and there's this layer of dirt on top of the clay, so that's going to run off eventually anyway, but that dirt was... It sounds like, you know, you could do a master's thesis at least on the hydrology of the Urbana landfill. So how are we going to treat that as far as what they're supposed to do with stormwater?
Scott Tess is here. He can correct me if anything that I say is incorrect, but I believe that solar panels are not considered impervious because they are slanted, and the water then sheds off immediately there. So from that perspective, I don't think it would be classified any differently than it currently is. There wouldn't be any requirements above what's there now. He's not answering,
Okay.
so it must not be incorrect.
I mean, from my perspective, it seems like it will be drier underneath the panels and wetter in between, and it's a little bit of slope, so there could be increased runoff. I guess they have some experience putting these on other brown fields. I don't know if there's anything quite like this. I found one they did in California, Riverside, I think, but they get a lot less rain than we do. They get about a quarter of the rain we do here. So I guess my main concern is, you know, what's going to happen there. I know in our lease agreement we have some special language about controlling erosion on the site itself, but when you have increased runoff, it runs off and then it still has greater speed once you get away from the site, and there can be gully erosion, stuff like that farther away from the site. So I guess, you know, that's my main concern. I hope we can get this project through. It's really exciting. I just wonder, you know, how much we need to pay attention to that.
Well, we do need to pay attention to maintaining soil stabilization on the landfill. There are many closed landfills around the country similar to ours that have solar installations on them presently. The developer will be responsible for maintaining vegetation and ground cover. Public Works already does inspections at the landfill to maintain ground cover and repair any erosion that occurs, and it happens from time to time. And so we will continue that practice.
Okay. And that you can't think of any sort of special conditions we should put on it as far as creating greater runoff downstream. And since we aren't quite sure, I don't think, whether this is increasing impervious area. I mean, you know, a parking lot runs off if it's slanted, so you know it's impervious. If it's going to be drier underneath there, it has some impact. So I wonder if we should research, you know, what other cities are doing. I don't know. This is pretty unique. So I don't know. You don't have any insights, I guess, either.
The amount of the site that's going to be covered is small. Certainly the rain will hit panels and then run off, so it'll be concentrated, I suppose, into areas between all the panels. But there's a lot of space between the solar array sites and any stream or any impervious. So the parking lot and road to the south and the stream to the north. There's a lot of space there for infiltration to occur for any water that doesn't immediately infiltrate.
Do you know if like EPA still does inspections on closed landfills, or how does that work? It's just our local group that cuss words.
I think this landfill is beyond. It's post closure. It's beyond. It's old enough that it doesn't have any active regulations. That doesn't mean there's nothing that applies. If there's an illicit discharge from the landfill, that's still going to be a problem. Whether there is Illinois EPA folks coming out once a year or something like that, I don't have the answer to that. The engineers at Public Works maintain compliance with all the pollution control rules there. But my guess is not, because it's post closure.
Okay, thanks. I'm excited about the project. I think you know, it's almost 20 acres of actual panels. That's about the same size, I think, as what the U of I has over off of Windsor Avenue. To get some perspective, it's big. I mean, it's bigger than when we first started looking at it. It's bigger than I thought after I started looking at, you know, what it was going to produce. So thanks a lot for bringing this to us, and all your work you've done with Sun Solar on it, Sun Power on it.
SunPower.
Any other questions? Sharice?
When I was reading about this, and it says that during operations, very few consumables are used and very little waste is generated. Operational waste resulting from solar energy system use will be handled and disposed of by the operator. My question is, basically, what does that waste consist of?
So in the 25-year lease that SunPower would be operating these solar arrays, an inverter, which is a little electrical box, may fail and need to be replaced.
Oh.
So that would be the waste.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, is there something in the water?
Yeah, there's not much else.
You know, okay.
Any other questions? It's been moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Bill. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have one textual amendment that we need to include in this, and that would be text reading, "This ordinance is hereby passed by the affirmative vote, the ayes and nays being called, of a majority of the members of the council of the city of Urbana, Illinois, at a meeting of said council." So,
Okay.
we passed it on. Oh, we passed it on.
Yeah, we passed it earlier,
Oh, I
too.
see.
So that's
Okay.
We can pass it again, but,
No, we've already done it. We don't.
okay.
Strike that.
We
Okay.
double passed it.
Go ahead. Will the clerk please call the roll?
it so much.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes.
That motion passes. Next is ordinance 2019-01-009, an ordinance amending Urbana zoning map, rezoning 502-504 South Broadway Avenue to B4 Central Business District, Plan Case 2354M18. Is there a motion?
I'll move that we pass ordinance number 2019-01-009, an ordinance amending the Urbana zoning map, rezoning 502 and 504 South Broadway Avenue to B4.
I'll second it.
I'm going to let Sharice second.
Okay. Sorry, I've just
I second it.
quick draw.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Sharice.
Let her get one. All right.
Presentation by Lori.
Thank you. So as the public speaker, Mr. Beckett, mentioned earlier, this ordinance only includes these two parcels that are currently zoned R6, so the brown ones here. And the request is to rezone it to B4, which would be consistent with the zoning immediately to the east, to the west, and to the north. That's the Central Business District zoning. That is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation of central business, and it would help enable the redevelopment for the Affordable Housing and Arts Center.
Technical questions for Lori.
I didn't point out, I'm sorry, the Plan Commission vote was a unanimous recommendation for approval for these two parcels.
Thank you. Questions for Lori? Discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
I know. So I'm just curious. This central business district is Lincoln Square, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why are there streets under there?
Well, those at one point were streets that went all the way through, and some of them haven't actually been vacated. Some of them have been, but typically, if it's still, if you can still see the pavement on the zoning map, typically that means that the street has not been vacated.
So it's kind of like when we had the alley over at
Yes,
the
ma'am.
Urbana Free Library that we
Yes.
built a building over. All right.
I mean, in
just
some
wanted to
cases,
check.
it's still used for transportation at least.
Okay, thank you.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes.
That motion passes. Next is ordinance 2019-01-010, an ordinance approving a special use permit for 1001 Saline Court in Mulsicote, Plan Case 2363 SU 18.
I'll move oh, sorry. You got a presentation first.
Either way.
No, go ahead.
I'll be brief, and the applicants have been here very patiently awaiting to address you just for questions if necessary. So this is a special use permit for Emulsicote, the one located at 1001 Saline Court. They currently have a special use permit in place, but that one specifically said to expand, another special use permit would be required, and they are here today requesting that special use permit in order to expand. They hope to move some of the operations from their University Avenue facility to this facility. So just really briefly, and this is rotated incorrectly. Let me see if I can.
This isn't awarded.
All right, now north is up, but now it's compressed. But basically, this is the end of Saline Court down here as it stands. They would like to expand in this area. And let me go back. I should have done this before, sorry. They would like to expand in approximately this area. Here's Saline. What we are proposing here is that special use permit with a number of conditions that are really specific to the uses that they intend to have at this facility, which, as I said, is an expansion. The Plan Commission at their January 10th meeting had a unanimous recommendation for approval with those conditions.
Any questions for Lori? Mary Alice?
So the plot that we're looking at, where is the expansion planned for?
Approximately here and into this site.
Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out, there is one single-family home right to the east of that property. If I blow it up, it looks like, but maybe it's not.
Well, we have got, SFR is the land use code that we get from the tax assessor. So if someone is paying single-family home, then...
It's fine. I was trying to figure out where the expansion was going to be. So I noticed somebody was talking about a burn, like putting in a...
There's currently a berm at their facility about here, and so one of the conditions would ask them to extend that berm for their expansion as it, heads to the north and to the east.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Bill?
I guess, no, I think it's a good use, a good move to get everything together. And it's a real attractive site. I used to be able to see it when I rode by there on my bicycle. I can't see it very well now because there's a big pile of shingles in the way. I did have a question for the applicant, though. If one of the things we approved when we approved the placement of that place that recycles shingles, one of the arguments I think was that those would be used for asphalt pavement, and I wondered if there was any, if you guys used any of them. Do you use recycled shingles in your processing? I mean, that would really be handy if you did.
You want the real answer? Or
no.
Could you come up and could you speak into the microphone, please? And thank you for your patience.
Oh, for sure. I'm not actually in the hot mix business. That's Joe Lamb or Cross Construction, and they use a lot of wrap material in their pavements now, recycled material. But shingles have proven, I should not say proven, thought to be possibly detrimental in some applications because what they do, they oxidize too quick. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not getting involved in that one. But I do not believe, I think they've tried it and it wasn't successful. They might be used in a small amount, but I don't think, it's not caught on like it has in Chicago.
Okay. Do you guys
I don't know
any-
Mr. Vondra, but Mr. Vondra has a lot of political clout in Chicago, and they use quite a bit up there. But it takes so much soft asphalt in your mix design to overcome those shingles.
Okay.
So it's a,
yeah, I appreciate that. and the
it's a mixed
answer.
design issue, actually.
Okay.
And don't
is there
take that
anything
to
that
the
you guys
bank,
do
what
as
I
far
just
as?
told you, but that's what I've been told.
I know you guys do allow the the petroleum-based stuff that goes into asphalt. Are there mixes that you can work on that would help fix that problem?
It would take, that's what they are doing with them in Chicago, but it takes a very hard asphalt now to make your asphalt mix. We're actually dropping down to seal coat grades or very soft asphalt to overcome all that wrap material in there, and which adds additional cost to it. And actually, it's not ever been proven that, there's been some 2-year projects. You don't really know too much on a highway in 2 years. So we have not got really involved in it. We've looked at it, but we've sort of stayed away from it for right now.
Okay.
I could bring a guy who could tell you all about him, Bill Pine, that works for us. He's one of the most respected mix designs in the whole country. And I just know that he's not in favor of them completely, so I'd be glad to bring him here if you want to talk to him.
Maybe I'll come out and take a tour sometime. If
You're more than welcome to come take a tour of our plant anytime, either one
All right.
of those. So you're always welcome.
Thanks.
We're rather proud of the Saline Court plant. I don't know if you say you rode past there before. The guys take a lot of pride in it and try to keep it mowed up, and I think we're one of the better looking plants around there, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think so too.
In between a pile of shingles, a pile of asphalt, a foundry, and a garbage transfer station, we fit right in.
Where did I
nice people like you do it hanging around a place like that.
Well, actually, I spend most of my time over at university, so I've got some other guys running that one out there. But I think I want to mention just, and I don't know what you're looking for on some of your answers, but we're going to move about 30% of University Avenue out there if this goes through on this phase here. And this is about a 5 point, we thought it was going to be a 3 million. I just got the final figures today, and I think this is going to be about a $5.5 million phase. But we're going to alleviate over 2,000 trucks at the university facility.
Wow.
I think this is something you asked for us back in the 90s, or it wasn't you actually that asked, but I was around there at that time, and they want us to start moving that plant out. They asked us not to expand that plant any further in the 1990s. We have never expanded that plant. We've operated and expanded our business, but never actually expanded the plant. We're to the place we have to. 2009, I think, we asked for your special permits. We spent a lot of money out there. Back in 2015, we put another 2 tanks in, and it's just another phase. And then we have one more final phase, which might happen in the next 3 to 5 years. We have neighbors that ask us all the time when we're moving, but depending on our financial situations, it'll be probably a $12 to a $15 million phase out of the final operations on the university. We were hoping Mass Transit would be, take the property, but that didn't quite work out, so we're actually paying for it ourselves now. So, and anybody is welcome to come to those facilities to come and view it. Yes.
Yes, Jared.
I was just going to make a motion.
Okay.
I'll move approval of ordinance number 2019-01-010, an ordinance approving a special use permit for 1001 Sailing Court for Emulsicoat. Came from Plan Case 2363 SU18, and I'm going to move that for approval with the conditions that were approved by the Plan Commission and concurred upon by staff.
Second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Sharice. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller? Wu?
Yes.
Yes.
That motion passes. And thank you for investing in Urbana.
Yes.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you very much.
Last item on the agenda, ordinance number 2019-01-011, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of certain real estate at 704 North Broadway Avenue. Staff report. Is there a John Schneider, Community Development.
Extremely briefly, this is the property we talked about acquisition in the closed meeting this evening.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
I move to vote on ordinance number 2019-01011, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of certain real estate at 704 North Broadway Avenue.
Moved approval by Sharice, seconded
Second.
by Eric. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes.
That motion passes. With no further business before this body, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Boom.